Hello, welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. With a few weeks to go for Lok Sabha elections, the Supreme Court has rejected a plea by State Bank of India seeking an extension until the 30th of June in the Electoral Bonds case. The five-judge bench, led by Chief Justice Chandrachud, observed that the KYC details will be readily available with the bank. So the bank will now have to disclose the information on electoral bonds by the end of business hours tomorrow. The Apex Court has also asked the Election Commission of India to publish this data on its website no later than 5 p.m. on the 15th of March. The court did not take any contempt action for willful disobedience of its previous order, but it did warn of action against SBI if the fresh directions are not complied with. The Supreme Court had earlier asked the bank to furnish details by the 6th of March. Meanwhile, the Congress Jaya Thakur has moved the Supreme Court to restrain the union government from appointing new election commissioners. The plea seeks a panel comprising the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition and the Chief Justice to decide on the appointments. The move comes at a time when Arun Goyal resigned as Election Commissioner, leaving only the Chief Election Commissioner, Rajiv Kumar, in the three-member poll body. To discuss this further, we are now joined by Professor Jagdeep Chokhar, founding member and trustee, Association for Democratic Reforms, and Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate at the Supreme Court. Also joining us is Om Prakash Rawat, the former Chief Election Commissioner. Mr. Hegde, first, your reaction to the very strong words used by the Supreme Court, saying that we're not entertaining the contempt petitions right now, but we will be forced to move against the bank for willful disobedience if the orders are not complied with.
Well, contempt is a means of ensuring compliance. Sometimes there is a feeling in government that a judgment of the Supreme Court is a judgment which can be reversed, which can be appealed, which can be varied, which can be clarified. And governments are tempted to use an Americanism, play cute with the court. This was no doubt an attempt by the SBI on directions to slow walk the process of disclosure of information which was mandated by the Supreme Court judgment. There have been instances where the Supreme Court, after having passed an order, a few days later reversed itself or granted an extension. During COVID, you may remember that the Supreme Court banned the Jagannath Rath Yatra. But then a few days later, it gave permission for the same yatra, subject to conditions, of course. So the SBI did try to get an extension on the March 6th deadline till the 30th of June, by which time the elections for the Lok Sabha would be safely over and the disclosure of information would likely not be visited with any particular political or other consequences. The Supreme Court turned it down. They said, look, you've had time. Our orders are meant to be obeyed and our orders are clear. Do so now by tomorrow. If you do not do it, then be warned that action under contempt may also be taken. I think the Supreme Court has drawn the line and held it.
Right. Yes, Supreme Court clearly drawing the line for the government and the State Bank of India. Let me go across to Mr. Jagdeep Chokhar. Mr. Chokhar, I would like to ask you, the donor details and redemption details will now have to be submitted with the Election Commission, and the Election Commission has to publish them by the 15th of March. Give us a sense of what kind of information will now be available on the Election Commission website. How does this help your organization? Why would this data be important?
Well, the information that is likely to be available on the Election Commission of India's website is exactly what you said. Who bought bonds of what denomination on what date? And who redeemed these bonds of what denomination on which date? This information is going to be available. I was about to say is likely to be available. But after listening to the Supreme Court order, I am tempted to say that it will be available on the Election Commission's website by 5 p.m. on March 15. After that, it will be left to those interested to figure out which electoral bond bought by party or individual or company X and redeemed by a political party Y of the same amount within those 15 days. So there are likely to be enough clues to allow people to match these two and figure out which person or which corporate donated to which political party, and around that time, or in a reasonable time before or after that, what actions did the government take, whether the government in the center or in the states, which may have a bearing or a nexus with the donation. So this is the kind of information one hopes will come out, and that will explain to people at large that money given to political parties, so-called secretly, was not really meant to so-called support the ideology of the party, but it was given for a specific purpose. So this quid pro quo that the Supreme Court mentioned in their order is likely to be revealed and made available to all to see.
Okay, let me go across to Mr. Hegde now. Mr. Hegde, will the donor details actually be clear? Will it be easy to identify that? Because it's quite possible that the companies may have set up another entity or may have bought some of these bonds through another person, through another entity, although legally.
Well, you cannot, with absolute certainty, given the state of data as it currently might come out, identify everyone with absolute clarity. You will, the donors who bought these electoral bonds will have undergone a KYC process. The banks will know whom they have sold it to. But those bonds were valid for a period of 15 days and transferable from person to person. So it may very well be that a big industrialist has bought bonds through some subsidiary company or through some electoral trust, which is not directly linked through him. And then the bond, after having passed a couple of hands, finally goes to another party, which then encashes it. So what you are likely to have is one set of data saying who was the first buyer of the bonds, and another set of data saying who was the last person, which was the party which encashed the bonds. Now, to draw the lines in between, that will be a job of triangulation and for data scientists.
Right. Mr. Chokar, what is the alternative that you would suggest to electoral bonds?
I find this question quite amusing, because I have actually written a piece that there was life before electoral bonds and there will be life after electoral bonds. The implicit in this question is that with the removal of electoral bonds, the electoral and the political process in the country will become absolutely a wild jungle where there'll be no law and everything else. Let me point out that from 1951 to 2016, before the electoral bonds were introduced in 2017, in those 60-odd years, the Indian democracy was alive and well, and it was thriving. All over the world, Indian democracy was considered to be a very good, vibrant democracy. So electoral bonds did not, beginning 2017, give birth to a new, vibrant, transparent democracy. What electoral bonds did was to put an extra layer of secrecy, and they made anonymity legal. And that was not an improvement over the existing system, it made the existing system worse. So what the removal of electoral bonds has done is, it has taken back to where we were in 2016. And there were problems with the electoral and political funding at that time, against which we have been working since 1999, and we will continue to do that. As far as the solution that you are asking, the solution is extremely simple. When demonetization happened, we were all told that the country will now move towards a cashless economy and a digital economy. As a matter of fact, the highest positions in the country told all citizens that they should make the smallest payment even to a rickshawala or to a roadside vegetable vendor through digital means. The application mentioned at that time was Paytm, which is today in a
Okay.
bit of issue. So the suggestion that we have is that political party, all donations to political party should be made digitally. And
Okay. All right.
if everything else can be done digitally, political parties can also accept donation digitally.
All right. We've run out of time, sir. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much to Mr. Sanjay Hegde and Jagdeep Chokar for joining us. We're also joined by former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Om Prakash Rawat. Mr. Rawat, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let me begin by asking you about Election Commissioner Arun Goyal's resignation. We have been reading reports that everything was fine. He was actually attending all meetings till the 7th of March, a day before his resignation. His sudden resignation, do you feel it raises some strong questions about the functioning of the Election Commission at that point in time? Were there differences within the Election Commission top management?
No, I don't think. It's an individual choice, person that he felt like leaving, and therefore he submitted his resignation after 7th of March. So I don't think too much should be construed out of it.
Right. So you're saying that not too much should be construed out of it, but has there been a precedent where the election has, or the model code of conduct has been announced and implemented by just the CEC in a major election process or a Lok Sabha election?
Yes, till 1993, all major elections, all elections in fact, programs were announced by CEC alone because there were no election commissioners. Only in 93, 2 more election commissioners were added, and after 93, 3-member commission started notifying or announcing the program.
Also, Mr. Rawat, is there anything wrong? Because the Congress, the opposition, are asking questions about the meeting of the election commissioners appointment body comprising of the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, the Law Minister. On the 15th of March, it is believed that 2 election commissioners may be appointed by this day. Is there anything wrong, precedent-wise, in terms of election commissioners just being announced before the model code of conduct comes into place or the major press conference happens?
Since there are 2 vacancies, so it is up to the President of India to appoint 2 more election commissioners on those vacancies. And whatever the time is, it doesn't matter. Even if 1 CEC is there, election process will go on without any issue. But if 2 more election commissioners are appointed in the meantime, if they are new to the election process, then there may be a little hands-on learning issue with those 2 election commissioners contributing to the decision-making. Otherwise, there won't be any issue for transparency and free, fair, and credible elections.
Coming to the petition that has been filed in the Supreme Court by a Congress leader, Mr. Rawat, that the appointment should be made by a body comprising of the Chief Justice, the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and it should not be made under the new Act for appointment of the Election Commissioner and the CEC. Do you think this will cut much ice with the Supreme Court, considering the new legislation has already been passed, it has become a law?
I should not be going into the minds of honorable judges as to what would they think and what would they pronounce. What I understand is that the Constitution and the laws made under the Constitution, according to the constitutional provisions, our democracy is run on that. And whatever is proposed to be done, that is, so long as that is in accordance with the law, I think nothing wrong should be construed in that.
Right. My final question on the issue of electoral bonds. A lot has been said. The Supreme Court has struck down electoral bonds. It has refused to give SBI more time to submit details of donors and redemption details. What has your view been on the electoral bond scheme now that it has been set aside? What is the best way forward in terms of election funding, according to you?
Actually, all the democracies across the globe are struggling to find an ideal model of political funding or electoral funding throughout the world. And we are one of those. We are also trying to improve the process of electoral funding. And this was just one-off mechanism. And since Supreme Court found that it is unconstitutional, voters had the right to know who is funding whom, and struck the electoral bond scheme. So we have to now wait for some new model or some new process for providing electoral funding. However, this today's decision will ensure that some balance of information will be available. I was just listening to Professor Chokar. He was very, very correct in pointing out as to two sets of information will be available, purchaser and cashier. Whatever happened in the middle, nobody would know what was transpiring in the middle.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Rawat, giving us your view on the Supreme Court developments around the electoral bond scheme and also the controversy around the resignation of Arun Goyal, the election commissioner, just a few days before the model code of conduct was supposed to come into effect. On that note, we take a short break, but don't go anywhere. We get you an exclusive interview with the Swiss Secretary for Economic Affairs, Ellen Budliger, on the other side. And this is on the trade agreement that India has signed with the European Free Trade Association.